Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. You guys know who it is. This is Tony Lynch. I'm the host of this podcast. And yes, we are your number one podcast for bringing you stories around death, down, and grief, all the messiness that comes in between it with people out here that are changing people's lives one heartbeat at a time. So not only are they walking the walk, but they're talking the talk. And now, before I bring on my next guest, I would like to say that if this is your first time tuning in, do me a favor, head on over to that YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time that we drop a new episode. And most importantly, if you know anyone who can benefit from the conversation that we have, please share it with them. We got something for everyone. Now, before I bring on my next guest, I would like to say that this is for educational purposes only. This is a live stream. So if you have any questions or comments, put them in the comment section. We'll be sure to answer them as we go. Now, without further ado, guys, help me welcome my next guest, Melissa Winger, to the show. Melissa, how you doing?
Hello, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. Now, before we get started, do me a favor, introduce yourself to the audience. Tell people who you are, where you're from, and about the work that you do.
My pleasure. So, my name is Melissa Winger. I am from Minnesota, and the work I do is around people with disabilities, like my son, and doing disability advocacy, doing health reform, trying to make our health system better for people with complex medical needs.
Wow, I love that. And thank you for the work that you do. Really, really important work, especially, there has to be, a lot of things
Mhm.
that a caregiver goes through that people don't even know, right? And
Yeah.
especially trying to change the healthcare system around it. So
Mhm.
let's talk about that for a minute. How did you get into this work?
So, my story begins about 29 years ago, and I was 18 years old and had a son. And my son was diagnosed at 4 months old with a very complex chromosome disorder. So, he is missing part of his fourth chromosome, but he also has extra number six chromosome. So, what this means is that he has an issue or a problem with every single organ system. So he's
Mhm.
very medically complex. He also has significant developmental disabilities with autism. And because his condition is relatively unknown, and that's kind of how it is with a lot of different chromosome disorders, is there will be no other person like him, and there never will be one. So we had to learn about all of his conditions one by one. And that took, I mean, his latest condition that he was born with was just diagnosed 2 years ago with a liver condition. So we're still learning and still taking care of him. It's sort of this 24-hour caregiving. I prefer to call it extreme caregiving at times because he's 24/7. Always has been since day one. He needs assistance. But I'm going to tell you that with all of that, he is probably the happiest person I have ever met, that I have ever known. This little guy gets up every morning and he wears a costume, and he wears 3 or 4 costumes a day. He has wardrobe changes. Um, and he just loves to make people laugh.
Amazing,
Hmm.
amazing. Now let's talk about the caregiving aspect because that is
Hmm.
a huge topic nowadays, and I think it's one that needs to have a light shine on it. Uh, you know,
Yeah.
so as being a caregiver, what are some of the
Hmm.
challenges that you have to, or most caregivers have to endure? When dealing with a lot of these situations that come about, right?
Hmm. I like to start with, and this is something I had learned over a few years, getting on social media, talking to other people that have children with disabilities, is there is a grief process right in the beginning, and I didn't realize it. So the grief process is sort of accepting the situation and having to grieve what you thought your child was going to be when you're
Yeah,
pregnant and you have all these ideas for your child and what are they going to possibly grow up to be. It's like you have to grieve that loss, and it's a whole different experience now. And the trouble with that is turns into survival. Now every mom's instinct, right, every parent is, my job is to protect my child, but this
mhm,
turns into something different when their survival is sort of dependent on you every minute of every day. reality is in your face that your child may not make it till tomorrow, and that's every single day. And so the pressure of knowing that one medication error that you make, one feeding error, one anything, breathing machine turned on to the wrong setting, anything like that could harm your child. Now, as a parent, how do you do that every single day for 29 years and going? And I think it's the same not only when if your child was born with a condition, but if something happens to anybody. So somebody gets a diagnosis, there's an accident, anything like that. It's that grief of what was and what is now going to be.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
Let's dive into that a little bit because the grieving aspect, most people don't understand that it's not always about the loss of
Mm-hmm.
someone. It can be the loss of, the expectations that you may have or something. It can be the loss of a home. You can grieve. You can grieve anything and everything in this world. And that's what
Yeah.
makes it such a universal connective thing with human
Mm-hmm.
beings, and like you said, and which leads me, as you were speaking, I started thinking to myself, like, how do you adapt on a day-to-day basis? Because, and the reason why I ask
Mm-hmm.
is because I know that as children, as people get older,
Mm-hmm.
there's other things that come about that you would have to adjust to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, the machine, right? You know what
Yep.
I'm saying? As we get older, everything changes within the body. And so
Mm-hmm.
now you have to figure out how to calibrate through that as
Mm-hmm.
well, right?
Yep.
So how do you do that? Is it just like figuring it out as you go, you know what I'm saying, and then hope
Yes.
for the best type thing?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And
Wow.
sadly, because if you don't do it, nobody else is going to do it. So
Right.
it's just you, and you are literally staring at your baby, and their life depends on you having to. One example would be these minor like procedures that are actually painful for him. So my son has a
Mhm.
feeding tube in his stomach, and I had to learn how to change those feeding tubes out. That's a painful process. That is a hole directly in your stomach, right?
Right.
And every instinct about a parent is to protect your child from harm, protect them from pain. And I would be the one now inflicting that pain, but you have to. So the mindset is so backwards, if you will.
Mhm.
And but you have to do these things to keep them alive. Of course, your child doesn't understand that, right? But the mindset is very backwards, if you will. And what happened to me is over the course of years doing all of these things, living in survival mode, knowing I would have to call 911, if my child stopped breathing, which happened a lot. And you're living in that crisis zone. You're living at this crisis level all of the time. So, what happened to me is I didn't internalize that in my mind, in my head. But what happened was my body had the effect. So I ended up having a very severe heart arrhythmia at 20 years old, and ended up having now I'm pacemaker dependent because of it. So my body took on that stress and those emotions before my mind even knew that I was suffering from anything. Like my body took that on. And I bet that happens to a lot of people where physically you have symptoms, but mentally you're like, what is going on with me? Why is my heart failing? I have no history of cardiac issues. Like I ran track in middle school. What is this? And so yeah, ended up with a pacemaker. It was all that stuff that it physically turned into something.
Right. And and that's a huge thing.
Yeah.
People don't understand. Like when grief is trapped into the body, you don't really
Mm-hmm.
understand it. It will manifest itself into some
Mm-hmm.
physical things, right? It took me a long time to figure that part out too, because throughout the few losses that I've had, not understanding, I felt something inside of me manifesting itself, outwardly, and I couldn't understand it, and I stayed sick all the time,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I didn't. I was like, I'm pretty well fit, right? I
Mhm.
stay in the gym, I eat well, I try to get plenty of rest when I can, I'm very mindful, like I take my
Mhm.
vitamins, etc. Why am I still getting sick?
Mhm.
Until I began to dive deeper into the grief process, and I started thinking to myself, like, okay, is we carry grief here. So what am I carrying here? And then you realize that it's affecting your immune system. And
Mhm.
this is the reason why. It's the stress, it's the offbeat of your vibration or your frequency that's inside of your body. And so it's warning signs. And if you can pay attention to the warning signs, you can begin to navigate it a little bit more, right?
Mhm.
So now, which leads me to my next question. As someone who's changing the way that health forms are approaching how caregivers do their job,
Mhm.
what are some of the challenges that we are facing in order to
Mhm.
get that support to help and support our caregivers that are doing this
Mhm.
amazing work out here?
That is going to be a struggle that still is happening. And I will say that the support, I'll just go back to my issue, and it's sort of kind of funny because it's this concept that I've been told 120 million times is take care of yourself or you can't take care of your son, right? That's the motto, that's what everyone says. In reality, for parents, I it doesn't calculate in my head. I can't process that. So, because my son doesn't survive if I don't help him, if I don't do his stuff, that's
Right,
the reality of the situation. So let's go back to me having this pacemaker, and I'm 20 years old. My son's at his probably most critical at 3 years old. And his dad, who was always very involved, he's working like three jobs, right? We're super young. He's just trying to pay the bills. So we have all this stress going on. And I have to go into the hospital and get these cardioversions where it's literally the paddles to reverse my heart rhythm. And they would always say you have to be admitted after we do the shock and get your heart rate. You're going to have to be admitted to the ICU. And I would always say, absolutely not. I came in, I would literally go in, get the paddles, get shocked, wake up, and then I have to go home because my son needs me. Like I only have an hour to spare.
right,
And the healthcare system was like, no, like you are going to be leaving against medical advice, AMA, right? You sign a form. I was the worst patient they had ever encountered because they literally could not wrap their heads around what I had going on at home. They were focused on me. And it's still like that today because in order to support caregivers, there has to be a problem. And I don't think caregivers speak up enough because I feel that caregivers, including myself, this is my job. This is my son. I gave birth to him. Of course, he is my responsibility. It is nobody else's responsibility. That is literally what I have going on in my head. So I don't speak up. And I feel like a lot of people don't. So
right,
then the world that is supposed to provide us support, the healthcare system, isn't going to because we're not like waving the flag saying help, 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 because we are like, no, this is our job. We have to do it. This is our loved one. This is my job. No one else's responsibility but mine. I think
right,
that's the problem. We don't speak out enough. Well, also because we're too busy caring for our loved one, right?
right, right.
Yeah,
So,
that's
so now, like, and, wow, man, like that's deep and that's heavy. And so I was thinking to myself, and give me your thoughts on this,
mhm,
like, because I know a lot of caregivers nowadays in hospice that work in
mhm,
hospitals with disabled kids, and they're working around the clock. They're working themselves, to the very
mhm,
bare bone, to care for them. And when you see a caregiver doing their job, they have such a great relationship with these with
mhm,
these individuals and things like that. Like they go in there and they're making them smile and things like that. But I've also seen them, 20 hours later, at the end of their shift, or even, looking to pick
mhm,
up another shift, but they're so exhausted, and you can see the sadness in them. right?
Yep.
Because you said something in the beginning, you know, they also go in with the notion that at any given time, this patient could
Hmm.
pass away, you know, and I don't think people really understand the importance of the work that our caregivers
Hmm.
have, because I know there's parents out there, you know, that are like, hey, you know, like 24-hour care, I have to take care of home,
Hmm.
and things like that, and they put their loved ones in the hospitals to be cared
Yep.
for, and they want the best possible care for them,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
But they don't understand the impact that these caregivers have, and sometimes they don't even see their
Hmm.
family members. Sometimes days on end, sometimes weeks on end, and you know, to watch our caregivers go through that.
Hmm.
How can how can we as a society bring more support to our caregivers,
Hmm.
bring more awareness to them, right? And saying, hey, the work that they do, you know, they need therapy too.
Yep.
Because I hardly ever hear about caregivers going to therapy. Why is that?
I honestly think, just like think, as I mentioned before, is that we just think this is our job and we have to be strong and we have to take care of this person, and if their survival is on me. And I honestly think that it's just this admitting that maybe you can't do it. I never wanted to admit that maybe I couldn't take care of my own child.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't admit that. This is my child. Like, I have to do whatever I have to do. And um, I want to say that's probably a part of it. Is no, we don't go and seek help. But I do want to bring up just one thing, because I think this might help some of the viewers here if they're kind of in my situation. Um, so I used to really jump on social media and do all these listservs or type of pages on Facebook with where you can talk to other people that have children with disabilities, or you can talk to
Mm-hmm.
that have a loved one in a care facility, anything like that. And I used to be so involved, and it provided me a lot of comfort knowing that I wasn't alone. But then over the course of time, like, I had to realize that you have to actually take a break from that, because what happens is some of these families are going through some very difficult times, and then what happens is you end up taking on that. Like,
That's
you are just upset about what happened to so and so's daughter or son or parent, and you just become this where you're taking on all of their issues as well, and you become very emotional because you've bonded. So it does help, but I want to say it is okay to take a break and to not have to consume yourself with all of those issues that are happening to what are now considered maybe you're just your virtual friends, but you're invested in them. So it
right.
is important to just take a break, because that's what happened to me. And some of these children that I'm friends with are so close to my son's condition. And there's a lot of people that don't make it. And to watch them have to um, put their child in hospice, and it just consumed me, because I know that could happen to my child. Take a
Yeah.
break is my advice.
That as well, you know,
Yeah.
and finding places that you can
Mm-hmm.
have certain techniques to use to decompress from things, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like breathing, breath work, right, tapping, yoga,
Mm-hmm.
meditation. Like I I tell people this all the time. Like, when you're going through it, it's okay to go through and learn
Mm-hmm.
different techniques. Just figure out what works for you, and what you will find is that those things would change as you begin to
Mm-hmm.
grow into the role that you're in, right? And you know, as you were saying that, you kind of answered my question, but I want to dive deeper into it, because
Mm-hmm.
one of the rules when I got into doing grief work, well, one of the things that I learned is that you cannot. It's going to be hard to not be emotionally invested with the people that you're caring
Mm-hmm.
for, right?
Yep. Yep.
And I think that's a deep form of empathy, you know. But also, it can be very detrimental to your
Mm-hmm.
own mental health when you're going through it. Like, And the reason why I say that, I know a few caregivers out there, and I know one now. She has been a part of a few funerals. Let's just put it
Mm-hmm.
that way. More than just a few,
Yeah.
right? And so I sat down and talked with her one day, and there was a whole thing written on her. Like, she had such a rapport with the individuals that she cared for, and when they left this place,
Mm-hmm.
she would go to their funeral,
Yep.
right? And sometimes she would realize that she was the only one there, and things like that. And I asked her, I said, sweetie, why do you do it? She goes, because, it's my way of showing respect to them.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I said, well, what do you do when you leave here? Because I was always curious, and I want to get your thoughts on it as well. She goes, well, once I give them their respect and everything, I know I have to learn how to breathe again, and it's off to the next one, right? But I carry their memory with me because I can always smile and think about the conversations that we had, how they made me laugh, and things like that. Do you think that can be challenging, not becoming emotionally attached to your clients or the people that you're caring for?
I That is actually a really good question because I don't see how you could not
Mhm.
get attached, right? And this brings me to, and this is there's a whole bunch of stuff that surrounds this, but let's say now my son went to a group home back
Mhm.
just about 4 or 5 years ago. Um, Hardest decision of my life is to sort of release myself as taking care of him and to let someone else take care of him, knowing they could never take care of him as good as I can. That'll never be the case, and that goes along with everybody, right? They're not going to
Right.
be ever as invested as mother and child as a caregiver. And the problem with this is why? Why did I feel so much guilt? And I think the reason is, as a lot of us know, is our long-term care system is um, I don't even know the right word for it. It's an absolute disaster. And I'm not saying it's just for the residents. I'm saying it's for everyone that works there as well.
Mhm.
If you think of how they are operated, there's no way that these can succeed. The caregivers that love the job, like maybe your friend who love the job and are invested in people, they get paid very minimal. They do not get paid as much as what they should for doing that kind of work. They're also they're basically not given any training or education. You can walk in and do the job and get paid very little to do it. And then you're asked to do things that most of us wouldn't choose to do, to take care of people, to bathe them, to change them, to feed them. They get paid very minimal, and they often have dozens of patients that they have to take care of every day. The shortage of long-term care staffing has been a problem probably since I know of the day my son was born, because
Right.
knowing that maybe he would have to go into a group home type situation terrified me. And here was me being naive saying, well, by the time he'll need it, it'll be fixed,
Right.
right? And it is, I want to tell you, I think it's exactly the same. Now, there's been laws and reforms that take people with disabilities out of the big giant state institutions and out into the community, into a group home setting. But the staffing didn't change. The pay doesn't change. They're barely making a living wage. And the people that love to do it and the people that enjoy that type of work can't sustain their families on that kind. They end up having to take other jobs, which is sad, in my opinion. And
Yeah.
so in that situation, then it goes down to it, not getting paid a lot, having to take care of 3 to 4 to 5 times as many people as you should. And these are usually high needs people. And also not getting any, and some of them don't even get benefits. That obviously is going to then affect the actual patient and the resident. And that's where we see the problem. It's not just the problem affecting the patients. It is problem affecting the actual workers as well, because the turnover rate is insane because they can't work that job even if they loved it. But I'm going to fix it because I got to tell you, I wrote a book about all of this and did a ton of research because this drives me insane. And it also affects home care, right? So my son when he was on machines like to breathe and such, he was on, he had nursing and we were approved, right? The state insurance approval gives you a set amount of hours per week. Well, that's good, but there's no staffing. There's no, maybe I get 7 nights a week of nursing, but in reality, I can only get staffed 2 nights a week. And then you take those home care people, and this is just in my state, but you take those home care people that could be RNs, nurses in a hospital, they would make 2 to 3 times more than they do in home care. And in home care, they are by themselves taking care of a person that has very high needs. There's no backup. There's no nursing assistants like in a hospital, but they're paid much, much less than people that work in hospitals or clinics.
Right. No. Wow, man. Because that is a
I
set.
threw a lot out there, didn't I?
No, you're totally fine. And Little Animals Protection says thank you for all that you're doing. So again, that just shows you that um, how much your work is definitely appreciated and needed, and so many others out there. So there's a huge community out here that are looking at our caregivers, going, wow, what I'm saying, like there needs to be a lot more recognition going to our caregivers out there that are taking on these responsibilities and help alleviate the stress that the families are going through. And to hear that their pay is not where it needs to be, that's very disheartening because of the simple fact of, it's like a first responder, just 24 hours a day in the same spot, right? You know what I'm saying? Going, hey, don't worry about it. You go do your thing. I'm going to cook. I'm going to make sure I'm going to do all of these things, what I'm saying, to make sure that you're taken care of. Which now, what I'm saying, is one of those things that makes me want to go out and find the caregivers and just give them flowers, like, sweetie, thank you for what you're doing. Here's a rose, just to say thank you for what you're doing, right? Now, this is gonna be one that I know maybe a lot of people are thinking about. Medicaid and Medicare. Do are they taking care of, are they taking care of making sure that these caregivers have what they need to do what they do? Or is it just like, oh, well, we're going to use it for over here, and then you guys have to just fend for yourself type thing? And why do you think that is?
Oh, that opens up a whole Pandora's box for me because I honestly feel, here's what I honestly, so especially people with significant disabilities, they tend to not have private insurance, right? So they are on a government program. Now, I'm not sure why, but this needs to be fixed. The reason why these things happen and the reason why the care is subpar is the reimbursement rates for Medicare and Medicaid are so much below private insurance. No, people don't accept it. People don't accept it. So good luck finding a dentist that takes Medicaid. Not going to happen in the state of Minnesota, anyways. There's what, one or two, maybe? And you know what
Yeah.
Medicaid pays for people with disabilities that are on Medicaid? Or people that meet the financial requirements for Medicaid is you either get a cleaning or you get your tooth pulled. There is nothing in between. Those are the two services. You get basic preventative care or you get your tooth pulled. So people tend to be with people with disabilities, right? Now all of a sudden they don't have teeth because Medicaid in the state of Minnesota, anyways. The state decides what Medicaid's going to cover. The states do, and the states tell you what the reimbursement's going to be. I'm pretty sure in every state the reimbursement is much, much less than private insurance, of course, and then even Medicare is a little better. So you try to get long-term care for somebody on Medicaid or Medicare, and it is where you're not in the fancy assisted living. So you're not in the wonderful brand new nursing homes. You are in the ones that are government funded. And what unfortunately, when you say government funded, is being paid very poorly. This is how I
Yeah.
interpret that.
Yeah.
So people, providers in all aspects of physicians to hospitals, that they don't like Medicaid, right? Because they get paid nothing. And the administrative barriers on billing, it's hard to even bill Medicaid in some states. So that's our problem. Maybe the reason why we can't pay our staff is because the Medicaid rates are so low, they're barely floating by, right?
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I am not a fan of the Medicaid system. Obviously needs to stay, but I think people have accepted that, pardon my language, a crappy Medicaid system is better than no
Mhm.
Medicaid system. And
Mhm.
why are we saying okay to that? Why are we like, we accept that? No. In the United
No.
States of America, can we get somebody their cavity filled versus pulling their teeth out? I mean, in my opinion, we're in the US. Come on. But people have come to
Yeah.
just believe it. Medicaid pays terrible. That's what they've said for 50, whatever, since it was invented, right? And then
Mhm.
we've just, okay, we'll accept that. I don't want to.
You know, as you were saying that, right? It really brought some concerns
Hmm.
because we are in the United States, and you would think that our healthcare system would be a lot better. But also think about foreign countries that have better healthcare systems. Like if you think about it, Germany, Ireland, Dubai, Italy, things like that. You go in there,
Hmm.
and it's of no cost to us, to their citizens.
Hmm.
And then you think about you think about what we're doing. Private insurance versus Medicare.
Hmm.
And I think one of the biggest things is when it comes down to private insurance, hell, most of the insurance costs more than what we pay a month for
Hmm.
our bills, our living expenses, etc. Right? You take that, and you have to have two paychecks in order just to take care of your private
Hmm.
insurance.
Yeah.
And
And our
then
healthcare outcomes are one of the lowest compared to other
right,
countries similar to us. And you know why you're paying even people with private insurance? These are all just my theories, by the way. Um,
yeah,
you're having to pay because that provider got $20 for something that he should have been paid $100 for on Medicaid. And
hmm,
so he's going to charge people with private insurance more to make up that difference to keep his clinic afloat. So that's why you're paying more, because you're having to pay to cover what my son with reimbursement was only $20. They need to make up that $80 somewhere. And
yeah,
also the amount of people that we have with our healthcare system, we have so many people just in an administrative paper pushing type role than we do people actually taking care of patients, right? Our administrative tasks are way beyond what we pay for a provider or a nurse to take care of a patient. When you have a provider or nurse taking care of a patient, you probably have 10 people in the back room doing billing, medical records, all the paperwork involved with that one visit.
hmm.
That's insane. That has no benefit to the patient,
No,
in my
not
opinion.
at all. And I'm right there with you. I totally
Yeah.
agree. It has no benefit towards the
No.
towards the patients, and that just makes me respect have
Hmm.
a lot more respect for our caregivers and things like that, understanding the depthness of what they have to go through
Yeah.
and things like that. And like we need more advocates like you out there. What I'm saying, pushing the envelope and changing the narrative
Hmm.
of how we take care of not only our caregivers, but how we take care of those that are in need of that
Hmm.
support and that help, right? Because this is crazy.
Yeah.
This
There
is
has been
crazy.
kind of going back to the long term care scenario, and I had to come across a very sad realization that I didn't want to admit to,
Mm,
but now I have embraced it. And it is something about people, especially with severe disabilities or intellectual disabilities. I'm talking also people that are elderly and have dementia or Alzheimer's. Their lives in this country are much less valued.
Mhm.
And that hit home during
What?
COVID. That hit home during COVID. And if you watched how people in nursing homes were cut off from their loved ones,
Mhm.
um, my son, I visit him once a week. I could not see my son for over a year in his group home. And people literally were able to see, they were able to visit people in jail before they could visit their loved one in a nursing home by months. And what happened to my son and what happened to a lot of people had nothing to do with COVID. So what happened to my son during this was um, he'd had an ear infection. Now my son is nonverbal, so he can't just pick up a phone and call me and say, "I need help. I have an earache." He doesn't speak. So they mismanaged this ear infection so poorly because they didn't want to have him leave the house. That they mismanaged this to where my son, this infection got into his face, got into his skull, and my son is now permanently deaf in that ear. He is also unable to move his eye. This infection just ravaged his whole face, and this was happening to a lot of people. They were dying of being neglected, not being fed. This happened across the country, and state laws, many of them were full no liability for any long-term care facility during a public health emergency,
Yeah.
not just for COVID. No matter what your loved one died of or was suffered at the, with neglect, those were not covered. Those you couldn't. There was no issue of not retaliation, but I mean, you couldn't do anything. You couldn't advocate for. They said, well, literally, I got a notice from this group home that said, well, at least he didn't get COVID. Like,
Wow.
what? And it was just this, and there was so much more to it across other states. There are people with significant disabilities that have a tracheostomy and they're on a ventilator to help them breathe. And they've been
Right.
on it for forever, and they have this at home with them. So they're on a ventilator at home. Now we went to this during COVID in the beginning of this ventilator shortage. So they started talking to these people with disabilities saying, if you show up to an ER, you're going to be triaged and your home ventilator may be taken away from you to go to another person. And the reason those triages happen is they looked at you and said, are you able to survive COVID? Or is this other person have a better chance of survival? If it was that other person, goodbye to that ventilator that you had at home for your whole life. It was disgusting and just horrific. And that really brought to light of um, there are people in this country that are much less
Hmm.
valued. And then I had to realize who was speaking up for them. This is a group that essentially can't advocate for themselves. So
Right.
they were
Right.
an easy target, in my opinion, an easy target. Because what are they going to do? They're not going to block a freeway. They're not going to go out and protest.
Wow.
This is just my theory. You
No,
know,
no. Yeah, I
it
mean,
was
but you're
awful,
not the only
awful,
one. You're not the
awful.
only one. And I want to pose a question to my caregivers out there. Have you guys experienced similar things? And if so, what were some of the things that you were able to do in order to help maintain a healthier lifestyle for
Mm-hmm.
not only yourself but for your clients as well? You know, how did you advocate for your clients? Because this is not the first time, and I think that's just beyond crazy that you have to pick and choose the value of a person's life
Mm-hmm.
because of the condition that they're in or a condition that they may have, a
Mm-hmm.
diagnosis and things like that. Like it should not even that
No.
there shouldn't even be a question of that. I'm sorry. It should.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, Melissa, that teased me off that we have to be this way,
Mm-hmm.
right? And of course, you was a caregiver for with your son for many years,
Mm-hmm.
so you had the chance to see a lot of the things being taken away, implemented,
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. And so you got to
Mm-hmm.
see the whole roller coaster of this thing, and saying, "Hey, we need to change this.
Yep.
This is what we need to do."
hmm It's a
During,
very sad. It
yeah,
was a very sad realization that my son's life was of so much less value in this country. It was a sad day
right.
for me.
Right. And it kind of reminds me of something, something that I read a long time ago. And
Mhm.
I was reading a survival book. I was reading, I thought it was pretty cool. And so I was reading it, but it actually, once, thinking back on it now, it was actually telling the truth, about the way people thought about other people.
Mhm.
Like, it's that whole rule of survival of the fittest. If we're out somewhere and you
Mhm.
get a broken leg, and just say for instance, we got predators all over. Say for instance, we're in Africa, right? You got lions and all of these predatory animals and things like that. They said, you know what? I would rather sacrifice you than to have them catch me. You
Mhm.
know, and we used to make jokes about this all the time. I know I used to, right? I used to tell people if we ever get into something and we have to run, I'm tripping you up. You're right. I don't have to. I
You
don't
just have
have
to run
to.
faster than the person, right?
Right, I just got to run faster than you, right? You know what I'm saying? So, fair
Great
warning to
strategy.
anybody: if we ever go somewhere and we get chased, I'm tripping you up, right? You know what I'm saying? So you might want to run faster than me, And I got long legs, and things like that. But
Yeah.
the sad reality of it is that's the whole concept of it now, right? And that's what it makes it seem like. It's survival of the fittest. Like you're going to have to figure out how to survive, um, and maybe at the cost of someone else.
And I have to, I usually repeat the quote from Gandhi that says, um, the measurement of a society is how it treats its most vulnerable.
Right, right.
We do a poor job of that in the US. Can I bring up another scary statistic?
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. Hey, come on. Let's put it out here.
This
Let's
is,
talk
and
about it.
I went down a road because this, and I did all this for the book that we'll link at the end. That book that I wrote, but it talks about vulnerable adult abuse because my son faced some of this, and it broke my heart. But I want to start by also saying the backlash I got in social media when I complained about what happened to my son in the group home from people was, "Will you put him in there?" It was this like, "You shouldn't have put him in there." Like that was
You
you
kidding
did.
me?
Like it was your, and I just got, oh, I was so upset because first of all, my son likes it there. He lives with three other guys, and he actually likes it there. And it was, but it was this backlash of, "You're his mom. How could you leave him in this group home?" Also, the rules during COVID with long-term care was because they're billing, they rely on that ability to bill, Medicaid or insurance to say,
Mhm.
well, because of the restrictions with COVID and where I could take my son out of that group home, but I had to keep him out for 14 days. That was the rule. But they would give up my son's room after 4 days. So he would lose his spot.
Mhm.
And group homes are hard to come by getting a spot in one in my state, anyways, where it took 4 years on waiting list to get him one spot in a group home. So that was hard to face that people were like, well, you put him in there. So again, like before, I said I had to take a break because people, caregivers, even if it's like your parents, how do you take care of them with work schedules, with school schedules? I mean, nobody should be shamed for having to get help for caring for their loved one, if you get what I mean.
No.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now back to my quote is that so many people that are in these assisted livings or in these long-term care facilities um, suffer abuse and neglect, like by shocking numbers. And it's like I said before, some of the staffing issues.
Mhm.
How can one person take care of 20 to 30 people? I mean, it's just not okay. But when you look at in my state, and I suggest maybe to your listeners, look at their state laws. But in my state, I had to take a comparison of what would the punishment, if you will, if you went to court, be if you harmed, let's say, a person with a disability had a service animal. Okay. If you harmed that service animal,
Mhm.
you would get, let me make sure I quote this right. You could be sentenced to 4 years, no more than 4 years in prison, or a fine of $10,000. Okay. That's the maximum if you hurt a service animal. You hurt the person who has the service animal, a vulnerable adult, the sentence could be no more than 1 year or fine more than $3,000. Remember, I said the service animal is up to 4 years or 10,000, but you hurt that person.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
take that dose of reality.
no, no,
We love
that's
animals. Nothing
ooh.
against animals. Love animals,
No, look, I love my animals, right? You know what I'm saying? But
of
I
course.
refuse to put an animal, the value of an animal's life over a human. Now,
Yeah.
I will say to those who have their animals that are family that are
Mm-hmm.
treated like their family. I get that as
Yes.
well.
Oh, of
You know what I'm
course.
saying?
Yes.
Because there's people out there that love
Mm-hmm.
their cats and their dogs and sometimes snakes and iguanas and etc. Right?
Yep.
More than they like people. Or
Mm-hmm.
they're more than and they treat it very well. I said, hey, do your thing. Do
Yep.
you? Right? Now we're and we'll go back to what I just said. I will never agree to holding the life over someone's animal
Mm-hmm.
over a human being, right? Especially someone's child, someone's mother,
Yeah.
someone's father. That to me is more valuable than anything in that this world can ever offer
Mm-hmm.
you, right? Or anyone else. It's a
Yep.
gift,
Yep.
right? But again, these are like you said, this is just hypothetical. These are just my opinions and my
Mm-hmm.
thoughts on it. You know what I'm saying? If you have different thoughts, that's totally fine too.
Yeah.
I am not here to
Oh,
convince you otherwise. I am
yes.
not here to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying for me, I will never not value another human
Yep.
being's life over an animal,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I just it's something in me, morals,
Yeah.
right? I had a friend. And they're still my friend. Had two kids that was autistic. Both of them passed away,
Um,
and their youngest son was nonverbal, and he was just hilarious, right? And but he was smart in his own way, and
yeah.
so his mom used to take care of him 24 hours a day,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because there were some things that she had to learn as she was going, and and things like that, and same problem. CPS. There was so many things like they wouldn't give her 24-hour care.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Every time they turned around, CPS was at their door,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I want to touch a little bit on that as well. Here's what, and that's another thing I don't agree with. If you're not going to help provide the care or the support that those families need to care for
Mm-hmm.
said family member,
Yeah.
then why do you keep trying to remove them from the homes that they're being cared for in?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's a contradictory thing. And, I mean, because they have no right. Another thing, the first thing, the people don't understand this. People, I think people are surprised when this actually happens. But they tell you,
Mm-hmm.
when you have a child, you have no rights to that child. And you, as a parent, never catch it and you
Mm-hmm.
sign the paperwork on it, which pretty much you just relinquish your parental rights to the state, giving your child or said, child or a family member,
Yeah.
you've just relinquished your rights, saying that the state can come in and do what they want.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be careful about that as well, right?
Yep.
But look, there's a whole community of people out there that are looking for answers. And I think,
Yeah.
we haven't even scratched the surface of some of the
No.
things that need to
No.
be changed. So let's talk about a few of the things that needs to be reformed and taken
Mm-hmm.
into consideration about having this important care for our loved
Mm-hmm.
ones. right?
Mm-hmm.
Medications, saying paying our healthcare workers
Yeah.
more,
Yeah.
so they can have a livable wage, right? There's no reason why you should be
No.
having to work 2 or 3 jobs just to make it. And you already got one job that requires you to work almost
Mm-hmm.
100 hours a week. That's ridiculous. And then you got to go
Mm-hmm.
and work 2 more part-time jobs just to pay your bills. That's ridiculous. So
Yeah.
let's talk about some of the things that needs to be addressed, like the most
Mm-hmm.
important things, and then we can tackle the smaller things once we get those. Because I have a feeling that once we address those bigger things, it will actually trickle into,
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying, the smaller things
Yeah.
in order to help it work in conjunction.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, let's talk about that for a minute. What
Okay.
are some of the things?
One thing this is sort of a pet peeve of mine, and I want people to really understand this, is when we talk about people, developmental disabilities, dementia, Alzheimer's, whatever, um, when they get angry or frustrated,
Mhm.
we as a society or as caregivers, refer to that as having behaviors. And those behaviors need to be treated, whether it's restraints, which I'm not a fan, or it's medical restraints, which means it's like a prescription to sedate them. I always look at the fact of, first of all, what are they trying to communicate? Sometimes it is very, very simple. That, like, my son was given some sedating medication because he was upset and he was banging his fists when he was watching TV and nobody had turned the volume up. Okay, let's look at
Yeah,
they're trying to communicate. So that's my first thing, is to have this understanding. Also, when you have somebody, okay, let's say you're just driving in traffic and somebody has incredible road rage and they're upset. We don't say that person is having behaviors and we should
right,
restrain them immediately. People are
right.
allowed to get frustrated in the world. So people with disabilities are also allowed to get frustrated. They don't need to be restrained or police called on or whatever. And like your friend, CPS, right? But we
Hmm.
do a terrible job of educating on what to do. Because the problem is when they get extremely frustrated, they hurt themselves or others. That's what you're trying to prevent. But we do a terrible job at educating our caregivers, families on what to do. And just realizing that sometimes the answer is very simple. Sometimes their stock is all twisted up and that's driving them crazy. Sometimes
Hmm.
it is very simple. But I don't think we do a good job in just educating. We don't provide any, like our paid caregivers. It's really hard for them to find education or training on how to deal with, when a resident gets frustrated or angry, which I believe they have every right to. I have the right to be angry and I have the right to yell at people. It's not pleasant, but you can do it and you're not going to get, you're not going to get tied to a bed. But that's what we do for people with disabilities. That needs to be taught differently, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect
Right?
sense. It does,
It drives
right?
me insane. Mm-hmm.
And I
They're
agree.
not allowed to be angry. They're not they have a behavior problem. Well, I don't say, Tom, who's yelling at the customer service person, I don't say, well, someone should tie him up. He has behavior problems. I mean, we don't do that. you know.
I think a lot of it, the resources are more focused on certain things, right?
Yeah.
And like when I started this work in the grief field
Yeah.
was right before COVID. I noticed the pattern right off the bat.
Hmm.
I knew that the addiction rate was going to go up. I knew that the mental health issues that people kept sweeping under their rugs
Yeah.
was going to go up. We knew that the behavioral issues that people were hiding were going to be exposed,
Hmm.
but yet no one wanted to listen to us.
No.
And sometimes, now here's the beautiful thing about COVID, that it did expose a lot of these things, right?
Hmm.
It did show the challenges that our caregivers are going through. It showed everything that we was trying to tell them. And then by the time they wanted to address these things, you could say that it was a fight trying to go, we told you so. We told you so. But
Correct.
what I did see versus what I didn't see, I saw the amount of people that were able to come out, like our recovery
Hmm.
coaches, our mental health practitioners, our neurologists, our
Hmm.
behavioral practitioners, things
Mm-hmm.
like that, therapists, I was able to see them come out. What I didn't see, and it frustrated me, and it still frustrates, and I know you
Mm-hmm.
can relate to this. What I didn't see was them going over and addressing the things that the education that our caregivers needed.
Mm-hmm.
That was one thing I didn't see. Hospice, hospitals, things like that was not getting the necessary education that they need in order to do their job, and it
Mm-hmm.
still remains a challenge. Just like how you said before, it still remains a challenge. So one of the things that I started doing is that by me having a lot of connections now, I tell often talk to people and go, hey, why don't you go get your mental health certification?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you go and get your behavioral analysis certification?
Mm-hmm.
Get something in um, and get something in recovery work.
Mm-hmm.
Reason being, and now I could be far off. These are just suggestions that I tell people, but it seems to work because when you see how everything is interwoven to everything else, right?
Mm-hmm.
The education is there; it's just not being offered to the right.
Mm-hmm.
I guess in one sense it is being offered to the right people. It just needs to be get offered to more. Like for me, I think if you're going to become a caregiver, there should be a curriculum that you follow, right?
Yeah.
There should be a curriculum. Like, what I'm saying? Like, that these are things like take with your most extreme patients.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with you, Melissa. You know what I'm saying? Like they shouldn't be restrained, but you should have to understand what they're going through as
Yeah.
well.
And then have the tools.
And have the tools
Yep.
that you
To
that you
resolve
need in
it. Yes.
order to get
Mm-hmm.
exactly. Another thing is, I think there should be a state-funded group of therapists dedicated to our caregivers,
Mm-hmm.
right? I do,
Yep.
and then there should be a way for us to bring in grants to
Mm-hmm.
actually be able to cover the cost of said services
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't cost the patient or their family,
Mm-hmm.
but that the caregivers can actually use in order to provide for themselves,
Yep.
so they don't experience burnout, right?
Mm-hmm.
Underserved and highly neglected. I think that's just
Yes.
me.
I agree.
Again, that's just me. Tell me what your thoughts
Mm-hmm.
are on this.
I completely agree. I think it's the whole system, and it's when you talk about healthcare, and this is what I also talk about in my book is there isn't one part. It's not the government, it's not the insurance, it's not the providers. It's everybody as a whole is
Right,
doing
right.
something to make up for the something over here, and that's what I talk about because I don't believe there's just one thing. Um, but I do. So the book title that I have is "Who Cares: The Real Patient Experience," and I just want to
Mm-hmm.
share why I came up with that name. Because I was struggling with my son over not being able to get services. I don't even remember what it was about. He was probably about 8 or 9 years old, and I'm on the phone with this pediatrician who is basically he has his hand. He's like, I can't do like that. I can't do that. I can't refer this. Whatever the excuses was, and then, but I was so frustrated, and he just said, "What do you want me to do?" And then I remember just my eyes just filled up with tears, and I said, "I want you to care. I just
Mm,
want someone to care." Because I felt like if somebody cared, that they're going to help me figure this out. They don't may not know the answers, but they're going to be more inclined to help me figure out the answers. But literally, it
right.
just came out as I just want someone to care. It was just that simple in my head at that time. I just want. I know that wasn't the question you had, but in
No,
speaking of
no,
caregiving, though, it's
look,
like a lot of these people care and they want to care about these people, and they're paid as much as no downside to fast food workers, but that's what their pay is equal to, and they're having to deal with people that are like I said, they do have behaviors and they're aggressive and they might actually get injured on the job, things like that, and they're not given any tools or skills or resources, and they're not paid for what they are required to do in some instances, and that's a shame.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's talk about your book a little bit. What was the aha moment that you said, you know what, more people need to hear about this?
Mm-hmm.
Let me write a book and expose this to people.
I have read, and I did read, and I always look for is why is our health system like this? And I'm talking
Mhm.
patient safety. I'm talking why are our medical records like this? Why is the first responder emergency medical system like this? And I would read books, and they were always written by, they're great books, but they're written by doctors or economists or politicians. And sometimes it would be a doctor who then also had an illness, whatever it was. I wanted something from a patient's perspective and not just in one diagnosis, but lifelong patient. Like this is from birth, literally, my book is about birth to long term care.
Mhm.
Each chapter takes on a topic of what I think is a problem in our system. So I'm going to throw out the first chapter. It's about patient safety. I talk about all of the horrible things that happened to my son with medical errors, whatever. The second chapter then is about why is the U.S. medical system like this, and did a bunch of research um, and that the whole book is like that. So basically, the reason why I wrote it is because I wanted to read it, and it didn't exist. So I said, well, now I just have to write it, I guess. So that's what I did.
Yeah. I
Mm-hmm.
love that. I love
Yeah.
that. And you know, as we begin to wrap this up, because I know you got a busy day ahead of you
Mm-hmm.
and everything, how can people find you?
So I'm on my website, whocaresbooks.com. And from there, you can see where to get my book, follow me on social media. And I did want to kind of close out by one thing that might help some of your viewers in their my
Yeah,
situation, because this
most
was
definitely.
extremely eye-opening. And all the years of attempting to get therapy, it took one woman and it took 15 minutes to relieve all of my guilt and stress about my son. It was the spiritual healer. I didn't even believe in that type of work, but I went anyways. And this woman, whether it was the confidence in her voice, but she just said, do you think that your son doesn't have his own purpose in this life? His own soul, his own, they called it a soul contract, that
Hmm.
he has his own life. He is not, he has a purpose in his life that he needs to inspire people. He cannot do that stuck in your house under your roof, basically tied to you his entire life. He needs to be out in these group homes or these assisted livings. He needs to inspire people. That is his purpose in life. And that doesn't have anything to do with you. That's him. Let him do it. Let him be on his own. He's going to get the care he needs. It may not be perfect. And that just removed lifelong guilt from my shoulders, saying, oh my gosh, I never thought of my son having so many needs and so much dependence on me. Oh my, I didn't even think that he had a life of his own or his own life purpose.
Right.
It was
Uh,
like, whoosh, it
it
changed
is
everything.
crazy, right? It
I'm
is
like, what?
crazy. And I think what happens is to see, I love the mental jujitsu that she did on you. Because I think in a lot of ways, and I could be
Yeah,
wrong, she actually shed a light on you of how
yeah,
much you were dependent on him to be needed.
hmm, yeah. She's like, his
Okay.
life has been like, predetermined or whatever, and it doesn't have anything to do with you.
Yeah.
Are you going to let this kid live his life, however disabled as he may be? Like, he's not attached to you. Let him go. Let him inspire people on his own. And it just was like,
I
I
like that.
mean, that
I
might be
love
something
no, I loved that because I love what she did, right?
she
This
did.
that
The
whole
confidence, too, was
whole
insane.
jujitsu that she just did on you that made you go,
She got
man.
the confidence was insane because I was like, I feel so guilty. I had to put my son in a group home and it's terrible. And she just went, stop it.
Yeah,
Stop it.
this has nothing to do with you.
Oh,
I
she's
love
like,
that.
cut the cord. He's 25 years old.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I would have to do that to people. Ooh, y'all better be careful when
She
y'all talk
changed
to
my
my
outlook
baby.
and everything in
Mm-hmm.
15 minutes. I was blown away.
That
And my
now
son is
show people.
inspiring people every day. My son is I mean, he's dressed in different costumes. Everybody's making people laugh. He's got this.
They
Go ahead.
and yes, he does. Yes, he does. And show people. You got a copy of your book that you can show people so they know what it looks like. Guys, go
Yep.
get your copy. All right.
Who cares?
Who cares, man? And her
That's me and my little
information
baby,
is.
and he had heart surgery, so that's me and him. And I had him
So
at
I love
18
that
years old,
artwork.
so we look very young.
Yeah. No,
Mhm.
no. See, and that's beautiful, right? Because this is shining the light on so many different
Mhm.
things. You guys know what the book looked like. Her information is in the YouTube channel. Go there, get your copy. Especially if you're a caregiver. Maybe you know a caregiver.
Mhm.
Get a book. Give it to them as a gift. All right. And now one more question for you, Melissa, before
Mhm.
before we wrap this up. If you had a superpower, what would it be?
Um, can it be a job? Can I be like the director of Medicaid
It can
and
it
change the
can
whole dang
be
thing? Can I change the
It could
whole
be
dang thing?
whatever. It could be whatever superpower that you
I'm
want it to
changing
be.
Medicaid.
Right.
That's what I want to do. We need it, but we don't need it to be this horrible.
Right.
That's what I'm
See,
gonna do.
again, I mean, it's a superpower, and a superpower is meant to reflect of who
Yep.
you are. Right.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be superhuman strength or invisible. It doesn't have to be any of
Well, I
that.
already
We're
have that.
human beings.
I already have that.
See,
I'm a mom. I'm a mom. I mean,
there you go. There
we
you
lift
go. And
cars.
and an amazing mom you are, and an amazing caregiver, an amazing advocate. And for everyone else out there, now before I let you go, I got one more thing. If you can leave the audience with something, what would you leave them with?
Mhm. You're not alone. And people that are feeling like this, whether it's my book or whatever, grab something to tell yourself that whatever you're facing today, you're not alone.
I
And
love
we're
that.
gonna make it better, but you have to speak up.
I love that.
Mhm.
For everyone that have been tuning in, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Rumble, all you guys. As we wrap this up, if you're just now tuning in and you want to check out the whole episode, it's in the YouTube channel. You guys already know what to do. Look, it's scrolling across the bottom. It's the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast on YouTube. Go check it out. Do me a favor. If I deserved it and you guys enjoy these conversations,
Mhm.
subscribe to the channel, share it around, leave a comment, let us know what you think, right? But most importantly, share it with other people that you think that can
Mhm.
benefit from these conversations that we have. We do one every day. We got a daily show for you, with some amazing people. Again, out here changing people's lives one heartbeat at a time. I want to say thank you to my amazing guests for coming on and
Mhm.
having such an amazing conversation and busting this thing wide open, shedding a light on the things that need to be changed in our healthcare system, in order to not only support
Mhm.
our caregivers, but to support the people that they're caring
Mhm.
for, right? And for all my caregivers out there, guys, my heart is with you, and
Mhm.
we're doing what we can to bring more support and education to you guys as well. So be a little patient. I know it's frustrating, but we will get this thing under control. For
Mhm.
everyone else out there, thank you guys for allowing me to keep bringing these amazing episodes to you and keep tuning in and just being a part of the conversation as well as the journey that we go on. And with that being said, guys, we're going to wrap this one up. We're going to see you guys in the next one. I love you and thank you for your continued support. We're out. Peace.
Thank you.